June 22nd, and Flamingo missiles are attacking the center of Moscow.
A missile. Holy shit!
There you go. Damn!
Muscovites started howling.
They're flying, bro. They're flying. They're flying.
And Z-bloggers started crying.
So it's fucked, damn it. Most likely it's even worse than fucked. So stock up on buckwheat and oil. I think soon the country is going to be totally fucked. So guys, buy salt, matches, canned stew. Let's get ready for autumn.
The AFU has launched a new strike on the center of Moscow. Putin has fled. Sobyanin is shooting down drones with his bare hands. Hundreds of missiles and drones are attacking Moscow.
This is just insane.
Just insane.
In the Moscow region, the Dubna Space Communications Center has been hit. In Voronezh, a missile strike by the AFU blew up the Sborka plant, which produces Iskander-K missiles, Kh-1s, and parts for the Pantsir air defense system.
So that they blew up the plant there, the building has already collapsed in the middle. We need to turn off the gas. Well, it wasn't the plant that was bombed, but this one.
Moscow and Crimea are burning. There's a blackout in Crimea, no electricity, no water, and no gasoline. And there are explosions in Moscow. An aviation, railway, and fuel crisis. Muscovites are fleeing. The evacuation of the capital has begun. On June 22nd, something terrible began in Moscow as well.
This is insane.
This is sensational, friends. Flamingo missiles are headed for Moscow. A missile strike threat has been declared in the Russian capital.
A missile. Holy shit!
War correspondents are already sounding the alarm.
People are asking me what happens next. I'll tell you what's next. They're gonna finish us off.
So we're screwed, damn it. Probably even totally fucked. So stock up on buckwheat and oil. I think soon the country is going to be totally fucked. So guys, buy salt, matches, canned stew. Let's get ready for autumn.
And the authorities remain silent. And here it is, a new missile and drone strike on Moscow. At night, the Dubna Space Communications Center in the Moscow region was hit.
They bombed the factory right across from me. That's it. It had been there for many years. Now it's gone. What a twist.
In Voronezh, a missile strike by the Ukrainian armed forces blew up a factory that produces Iskander-K missiles, Kh-101s, and parts for the Pantsir air defense system.
So that's the factory they blew up, the building in the middle has already collapsed. We need to turn off the gas. Well, it wasn't the factory that was bombed, but this one right here.
Putin has fled Moscow. Air defense systems are being installed on civilian sites.
Shortly, a helicopter is coming back with this kind of specific object. And there are guys waiting on the roof.
Moscow's air defense can't cope. Sobyanin is shooting down drones with his bare hands, and his telegram was hacked. They wrote, "Glory to Ukraine," and Moscow is burning there.
Damn, do you know how many times they fired over there? There were probably a whole lot of explosions, really a lot. Well, basically, that's it. The factory is gone now.
For the first time, a missile alert has been declared in the center, in the Kremlin, in the capital of the Russian Federation.
I have no fucking idea what flew in here. This place is on fire, and it turns out, fuck, everything just went to hell. It's just total fucking chaos starting here. I have no fucking idea what flew in here.
I just walked right through this exact place on foot. It's all mangled. God, what's happening here?
Yeah, holy shit, damn. Looks like this is clearly not just a fire.
We'll discuss all this with the well-known military analyst Roman Svitan. Moscow and Crimea are burning.
Brutal.
I see it's getting higher and higher. Oh my god!
There's a blackout in Crimea. No electricity, no water, and no gasoline.
The entire base exploded. Everything is on fire.
A curfew has been imposed. Rolling blackouts. Strikes on 4 bridges. There are no supplies. It's a collapse over there. SBU drones struck both sides of the Crimean bridge. The port in Kerch, the oil terminal, the Russian post office, and the Port Kavkaz have been hit. The FSB headquarters was blown up, and last night the Tavricheskaya TPP was attacked.
They're screwed. Yeah, those are the tanks at the VTG.
Russian war correspondents are calling on the commander-in-chief of the Navy to shoot himself in the wake of the AFU attacks on Crimea. And most importantly, the commander of the Unmanned Systems Forces, Robert Brody, promises the complete demilitarization of Crimea. The plan is the total destruction of air defenses, ports, the fleet, logistics, energy facilities, and transport and tourist infrastructure. The Rashists are fleeing. It's an apocalypse in Crimea. The bridges are burning. Crimea is left without gasoline, electricity, or water. The Rashists are fleeing en masse from the peninsula.
Hey you, to the train station. This isn't a train station, not a station at all. We have no idea where we're standing. It's just rocks here. This is just a mess. God, why am I here? I want to go back to Moscow.
What are these ruins?
On June 22nd, the SBU struck both sides of the Crimean bridge.
They hit, I think, some kind of oil depot there. And so it just went on all night.
Kerch, there are no more ferries. 3 were hit at once. The Kavkaz oil terminal in Krasnodar Krai was blown up.
We're screwed. This is insane. Yeah, those are the tanks that you can see from the VTG. What if it blows up now? No, it won't blow up.
Russians are already waiting for the Kerch bridge to be next to explode and are fleeing the peninsula en masse.
My husband and I fled from Crimea to a village with our last bit of money.
Well, that's it. I'm leaving Sevastopol. I'm leaving. I hope the bridge doesn't get blown up before I leave. The land route is completely blocked.
The Crimean bridge, a massive traffic jam. More than 700 cars are lined up to leave Crimea after the night attack. Crimean Vibes 2026.
So what exactly is happening? Are we living in some kind of stone age? We're living in the age of dinosaurs.
Stability is extremely important.
In my opinion, we're heading towards some kind of catastrophe.
Meanwhile, another strike on Moscow. Sobyanin is having a meltdown. His Telegram channel was hacked. He's crying there. At night, the Dubna Space Communication Center in the Moscow region was hit. Drones are attacking Moscow. And in Voronezh, a missile strike by the Ukrainian armed forces blew up the Sporka plant, which produces Iskander-K missiles, Kh-101s, Pantsir air defense systems, and parts for them. We will discuss this spectacular morning, day, and night in Moscow, Crimea, and the regions with the well-known military analyst Roman Svitan. Roman Grigorievich, I'm glad to see you today on June 22nd.
Good afternoon. I wish everyone good health.
Roman Grigorievich, well, shall we start with Crimea? Well, it's just some kind of nightmare. So there's no gasoline, rolling blackouts, no water, no food supplies. There's a huge traffic jam at the exit from Crimea. 3 ferries are on fire at once, and we're attacking military targets. So the SBU struck both sides of the Crimean bridge. Port Kavkaz, the FSB in Crimea, the headquarters, Tavricheskaya TPP, and more.
My husband and I fled from Crimea to a village with our last money. What made us do this? The lack of electricity in the city, constant drone threats, kilometer-long lines for gasoline at insane prices, and the absence of decent paid work. This is just trash. God, why am I here? I want to go back to Moscow. What are these ruins?
Madhya promised that they would launch almost 5,000 drones a day there, that they would block Crimea. If you read the public channels, it all seems to be heading in that direction, that they want to blockade Crimea. They want to cut off Donetsk.
What do you say? Spectacular. Just a strike.
Well, for the 3rd year now, we've been outlining the direction toward Crimea as one of the main objectives. Now they've just started to carry it out. 3 Achilles heels. We've repeated it 649 times. Not everyone listens to us regularly. Russia has 3 Achilles heels: Moscow, oil, and Crimea. That is, their strikes on these points, on these locations, first of all, can't be stopped if you know what to hit them with. And on the other hand, it is precisely the pressure on these points that will ultimately lead to the death of the Russian Federation. Moscow. Well, for Moscow, the optimal option is, of course, to use ballistic missiles against it. Once ballistic missiles appear, everyone will see it. Almost every day, there will be about the same kind of mess that the security services created by breaking through the Russian air defense on the wing, the aviation component. That was a special operation. Everyone understands this perfectly well. It was thoroughly prepared. The second is the oil industry. We need to keep striking the oil industry, especially now when the price of oil has gone down already below $75. That is, after some issues were resolved in the Middle East, the price went down and the Russian oil price will be 55 to 50. And if prices keep falling, it's summer now, and that's basically how it will be. Then it will drop again down to 40 and below, meaning below the cost price for some positions. And third, of course, is Crimea. Crimea, in this sense, is probably the Achilles' heel squared. Why is it an operational cauldron? The operational cauldron is geographically squeezed between the seas. And those who advise the commander of the Russian Navy to shoot himself are giving that advice to the wrong person. They should have advised Putin to shoot himself. It was he who personally made the strategic decision to forcefully seize and annex Crimea. This situation presents exactly the same picture as if Trump now suddenly made the choice to seize Iran's Keshem Island. I mean, they would have rushed in there and all of them would have died there. Because any island, any peninsula that is then turned into an island is impossible to defend on its own. Remember, by the way, here's a vivid example, the Snake Island. Do you remember the Russians seized it? So how long did they stay there? It's just a matter of time before the entire area is destroyed by strike weapons. So Snake Island is a small copy of Crimea. That's what will happen to Crimea. It's the same picture, just stretched out over time with a greater number of strike weapons, with different mechanisms of pressure on the Russians, mainly from the air, meaning the aviation and missile component. And ballistic missiles haven't even been brought into play yet. Aviation hasn't been brought into play yet either. So far, it's only drones that are operating. As for Crimea, some of the missiles are ground-launched or air-launched, either Neptunes or Storm Shadows. In other words, Crimea itself is vulnerable to strikes. It can't be covered. No commander will be able to protect it when the strikes are coming from the mainland. That's what we're doing right now. So it's not the commander who should shoot himself. Let's get him out from under fire, so to speak. The one who really should shoot himself is Putin, who gave the order to seize this, let's call it, island after the operations of unmanned systems like those of Madhyar. Again, the security service of Ukraine found ways to break through along a specific azimuth, to break through the enemy's air defense system in a targeted way. This became clear with Moscow. After several months of preparation, they broke through. So in other words, they fertilized this Moscow egg cell with a Ukrainian sperm cell. And the Russians even helped with that. So you realize, since that's the case, why not use those same Panzer systems to knock the lid off some hatch on that very hood? After all, we saw all that footage. So the exact same mechanism was used to break through the air defense of the Kerch Bridge. That is the same security service, the same mechanism, the same preparation. And they got practically right up to the Kerch Bridge, destroyed. You're right, a few ferries that were still left, the automobile ferries. The railway ferries were hit, and the last Slavyanin was struck by the Gur a few months ago. The automobile ferries remained. And by the way, the Greeks sold one of the ferries to the Russians, specifically the Panagia, that's a Greek ferry. This really raises a big question. How can the Greeks behave like this? At the very least, it's not proper. So nevertheless, these ferries were hit and movement has been stopped. As we discussed before, we need to get our drone forces together and fly out to that site where a lot of fuel was stored, fuel tankers specifically right there on those ferries in the Caucasus area. Caucasus is the so-called Port Caucasus in the Kerch Strait. This is one of the floating docks, so to speak, of the ferry crossing from the Caucasus, from Taman to Kerch. In other words, you could say that here too, the so-called sea bridge was cut off. And then there were further strikes. Strikes, first of all, on the oil terminals in Kerch as well. A major oil depot was destroyed there, which supplied at least the eastern direction of Crimea. Several railway bridges and overpasses were also destroyed. Plus, you are right, a strike was carried out on one of the FSB's command systems. That is, yes, and they caught it quite well when there was a meeting going on there, especially since it was the control center for so-called communications. They got a good evening from Ukraine, as it's called. They started working on Crimea seriously, really seriously, with the main goal of liberating it from the Russian military presence. and it has already begun. Well, at least maybe not so much the military yet. For now, it's just civilians. At the exit, there are already nearly 1,000 cars. People don't know how to leave, or at least they have nothing to leave on. Watch Gentlemen of Fortune. Well, if anything, dilute the gasoline with donkey urine, and you can drive on it, because in Gentlemen of Fortune, they were driving around like that last millennium. Granted, someone did get 10 years in prison for it, but that's how it goes.
Roman Grigorievich, the fifth attack on Moscow in the last 5 days, this is just some kind of shock content. So first of all, the most important thing is that Sobyanin's Telegram channel was hacked, and they wrote there, Moscow is burning, glory to the AFU. Then Sobyanin came out and started shooting down drones with his bare hands. What actually happened? A new strike on Moscow has begun. More than 100 drones have broken through and are still breaking through. They're currently flying toward Moscow. In the Moscow region, it was reported that the Dubna Space Communication Center in the Moscow Oblast was hit. It's very important that along the way, as I understand it, in Voronezh, a missile strike by the Ukrainian armed forces blew up an assembly plant that produces parts for the Pantsir air defense system, Iskander-K missiles and Kh-101 missiles. And right now, the attack on Moscow and the Moscow region is continuing. All airports have come to a standstill. There is no aviation kerosene. There is a colossal problem with gasoline. The internet isn't working. Putin has fled Moscow. What do you say?
No one actually hacked him. He just wrote a letter to Putin himself saying something like Moscow is burning and so on and so forth, and just posted it on his own page, on his cloak, so to speak. And then, of course, everyone read it. And since he had to find a way out, he started saying that someone had hacked him. These are his thoughts, what he sees at the moment. There was a very serious attack today, quite well planned and competently prepared. But as I've said many times, if drones are sent to Moscow, unless it's a special operation or ballistic missiles, it's practically a suicide mission for them. Or it could be a misrepresentation of information. I can clarify that here. Maybe it's a misrepresentation of information because the drones that are heading to Dubna, and Dubna is 120 kilometers beyond Moscow. And in Dubna, well, we've talked about Dubna several times already. So where exactly can you send drones in the direction of Moscow? In the Moscow region, starting from Zelenograd and ending with Dubna. First of all, in Dubna, there's a Russian nuclear center, one of the main nuclear centers. They have colliders there, all sorts of things. And this time the target was the Space Communication Center in Dubna, where there are about a dozen classified secret facilities. Well, naturally, all the industries there are tied to the military. So if some of the drones were sent to Dubna, so be it. You can operate in the Moscow region. By the way, this strike on the center shows that it's possible to operate in the Moscow region. There's no point in sending drones to Moscow just so Sobyanin can write about it. Ballistic missiles should be sent to Moscow. That is, we need to wait for ballistic missiles eventually. And in the meantime, send drones to places like Dubna, Zelenograd, somewhere outside the MKAD at least. Because the MKAD area is, give or take, 10 to 15 kilometers. Along the MKAD, there are those same Pantsir systems, meaning they practically shoot down everything. Unless it's a special operation like the ones by the SBU, but let me repeat. Those take several months to prepare, and the approach there is quite serious. At the same time, a very serious strike was carried out on the Voronezh plant. Drones tried to approach it several times, but it didn't work out. And as for those that did get through, well, hitting a military facility with 50 kilograms of explosives is basically just scratching it. What got in there was probably a Storm Shadow or maybe a Scalpel or a Storm Shadow, since they say it was air-launched, and those have warheads of about half a ton. So I think it was a Storm Shadow, although it could have been something else. It doesn't really matter. The main thing is our air forces did their job. They took out the plant, which is actually very important for the production of microelectronics at various levels, mainly components and assemblies for missile technology, including for drones as well, at the very least for the same Geran drones, for the same Iskanders. So there was production there and at various levels. In other words, it's a multi-purpose facility and it's a dual-use plant. Some of the microelectronics, including, go into Russia's energy sector. And for us, of course, it's also important to take out the energy sector. So it was only a matter of time before something hit Voronezh as well. Within a day, I think objective monitoring data will be decoded and a decision will be made on a repeat strike if it's needed. If the technological process is stopped, then you can basically write off the plant.
Roman Grigorievich, may your words reach God's ears. Flamingo missiles heading toward Moscow. A missile strike threat has been declared in the Russian capital. I'm reading this right now while we're doing this stream. Missile alert, missile alert. So right now, so to speak, what do you think?
It's definitely possible. Why? Because, well, let's put it this way. This is the second year we've been hearing about the flamingo. Some little noses are showing them to us. Yes, in parallel, but they have to be somewhere, right? The thing is, well, by the laws of the genre, even in theater, if a gun is hanging on the stage, at some point it has to go off somewhere in some scene, usually at the end, right? But nevertheless, it's the same situation here. If we've been hearing about the flamingo for the second year now, at some point they have to show up. I don't rule out the possibility that, well, the Russians themselves begged for it. They keep telling this story that we're these great fascists. Well, here you go, fascists, catch this grenade. On June 22nd, the flamingo already took flight. That possibility exists. The question is, how many flamingos are there? How will they get there? Because after all, look, for a flamingo to reach Moscow at the speed of, well, if the speed is around 700, then it would take, well, not quite an hour, a little less, about 40 to 45 minutes. So basically, it can be seen. If they are launched, air defense and SAM systems can intercept them, and aircraft can intercept them as well, at the very least. But if they are launched, taking into account the saturation coefficient of the system, and at the same time, for example, drones are coming in as well, then in principle, several missiles might get through. Even a single missile, just imagine a ton lands next to Lenin, and then really, as we're saying, Ilyich will run off to his hut, where, who was it? Zinoviev is waiting for him there. Everyone used to say it was Kosmodemyanskaya or someone like that. No, that's not the case. It was his wife. Zinoviev, most likely he was acting as his wife there, in that hut. So the possibility of missiles reaching Moscow, even just a single missile, is in principle possible. We saw this happen. Several drones got through. If this was a special operation by the security service, which we can't rule out, since the SBU has already demonstrated such mechanisms, it means there are ways to break through Russian air defenses, at least along one azimuth, at least for a single missile. It will be a spectacular show if even one, just one flamingo, with a payload of 1 ton or even half a ton, they can actually be loaded with half-ton warheads, by the way, including either FAB 500 or FAB 1000, depending on the range. Although it's 500 kilometers to Moscow, the FAB 1000 can reach that far at least, and the spectacle, the spectacular show, might even happen before our stream goes live.
Roman Grigorievich, there's no gasoline in Moscow at all, no kerosene. People are buying salt, buckwheat, matches, canned stew, digging up potatoes. Russian war correspondents are actually saying this right now. That means they don't understand what's going on. A huge number of air defense systems are being installed right now on civilian buildings, on skyscrapers in Moscow. Putin has fled Moscow. He's not there. He's currently at Valdai. And at this moment, information comes in that total mobilization has begun in Russia, with mass conscription of women into the armed forces. Reports of forced mobilization of men are coming from the Penza region of Russia. There are raids, beatings, and forced conscription taking place there. What is happening, Roman Grigorievich?
Well, now there will be a lot of people from Penza in the army, since in Penza every other person will be a Russian from Penza. So how are they, and what's the correct way to call them there, right? So we'll be fighting against people from Penza, especially those who have been busified. We know ourselves what that means. We have this problem too, this so-called buzification. People who are unable to fight are shoved into buses and then they end up on the front line. Either they die, go missing in action, or surrender, depending on the circumstances. Now, Russians will face the same problem. At the moment, Russians do not have this problem. They have 700,000 recruits motivated by financial incentives, that is so-called recruiting, but forced busification will ruin all of that recruiting. Is it clear why they're setting this objective? They simply don't have the money. The destruction of Russia's economy, which we've talked about with you repeatedly, leads to the fact that there's nothing to pay recruits with. Nothing to bring additional personnel into the ranks. So this is actually a good option in this sense, no matter what anyone says, even if they bring in more mobilized troops and so on, this will dilute the professional Russian army that's motivated by money. So in this respect, there is definitely an upside here. Let's wait and see how the Russians handle this. And as for the fact that they're running out of, there are no matches, or they're starting to buy up matches, salt, pasta, or whatever else they're buying, let's just go ahead and recommend them some sauerkraut and bast shoes. Sauerkraut, bast shoes, cabbage, soup, and bread. In other words, you'll steer the situation toward collapse and make the decision to dissolve the Russian Federation even faster. The thing is, if a decision of this kind is made, then in principle, after that, it will be possible to negotiate with each republic that leaves the Russian Federation about certain reparations and establishing some kind of relations. And there will never be any further relations with the Russian Federation. It will fall apart, just as the Soviet Union once collapsed for the very same reasons. And the sooner you break it up, the more enterprises you will leave untouched on your own territory. Otherwise, everything will be destroyed, at least up to the Urals, that's for sure. And now it's already beyond the Urals. They've already reached Tyumen. That's more than 2,000 kilometers. Our drones went there and stopped the technological process at the Tyumen Oil Refinery, Western Siberia. So we're already reaching that far because there isn't much time left and our capabilities are increasing. And not just ours, but those of our partners, our European partners as well. Now, Trump has already made his rounds at the market, as we used to say. Just over a year has passed. He made his rounds, figured out who is who, and is once again returning to support Ukraine. And if the Americans get involved, it won't be easy for the other side.
Friends, the well-known military analyst Roman Svetan. Roman Grigorievich, thank you very much and see you again this Wednesday.
Goodbye.